The title today that I have is called Today's World. And what brought this to interest to me was there was an article that I read in the May-June 2022 Beyond Today magazine. The title was by Russia Invasion of Ukraine by a Biblical Perspective, which was on page 12 on that magazine. And there was a quote by Vladimir Lenin. And of course we know who Vladimir Lenin is. He established communism in the Soviet Union when it became the USSR. But in this quote it says, there are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks when decades happen. So this provoked a thought with me, and I started thinking, well, I've got 5 decades in the Church of God, which is the entirety of my adult life. So I asked myself the question, what have I seen? What have I observed during these times? And in thinking about it and going through, I could see the progression towards the end time. Now granted, there were times events would happen and things would speed up, and then all of a sudden there was a pause or a slowdown, which agrees with that second part, and weeks when decades happen. So it was a pattern, because I remember being a younger man in the church when these sudden events would happen. All us guys would get together and talk about, okay, this is coming, this is that, Christ is returning. And of course that was not true, because then it slowed down. And now I look at the second decade of the year 2000, like we're beginning with 2020. There has been a progression of events. We started with the COVID pandemic, which affected the world globally, the economics and everyday life, people's jobs. But then it continues. Then we had the 2020 election take place and all that will happen with that. And it is still going on. It hasn't stopped. And now we have monkeypox and things like that. But what the focus was on was the Ukrainian war. And what was the effect of that? The effect is on Europe. Now I kind of got a little excited because Europe was making these sudden advances. Okay, we got to defend ourselves, we got to do this, we got to do this and that. Then what happened? Europe, being the iron and the clay, started having their divisions, which has done what? Slowed that process down. Now granted, they're still trying to sort their way through this. And there are things that are now set in motion in Europe that are continuing and will eventually come to fruit. But it's that statement, these decades where nothing happens, and then there are weeks when decades happen, and we're kind of seeing that now. And then I want to go to John 16, verse 33. And I'll be using the New Living Translation. It says, this is Christ speaking. I have told you all this so that you may have peace in me, which we have. He is our peace. Here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows. But take heart, because I have overcome the world. Now the thing that I focused on was the trials and sorrows. Even though we are in God's church, we have experienced this because we live in a dark age. Things that happen in our society affect us. Not to mention our personal lives. Like one, and I haven't told many people this, but my wife and I, we lost a child. My wife, would have been our third one and last one, and unfortunately she miscarried. And the thing that it left with us, there's always an empty chair at our table. That was a trial and that was a sorrow. But we suffer these things, the health, losing children, those that we love passing away, and financial gains, financial loss. We're part of this. It's part of our life. But we have our peace in Jesus Christ. He brings us through this no matter what the result is. And that's the beauty of this, of this peace. And I want to continue on to 2 Peter 3:3. where Christ continues. He says, most importantly, I want to remind you that in the last days, scoffers will come mocking the truth and following their own desires. So I'm going back to this thing in weeks where all these things happen. When you look at our nation today, and I'm focused on our nation, of course this is going on globally, what exactly is going on? There is mocking of the truth. They're beginning to focus on Christianity, on churches, and following their own desires. Where do I need to go with that? You have all this transgenderism. They can't even define what a woman is. God can, and God did. But their desires. This is our goal. I mean, even though it's a minority that's dictating to the majority, it's their desires that they're following and trying to force on us. And it's very clear that it says, I want to remind you in the last days, these are the things that we will start to see in our today's world. And I want to move to 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. And it speaks very clearly of today. It says, you should know this, Timothy, that in the last days there will be difficult times. I think all of us can see that now. Financially, it's getting tough. With the inflation, the cost of gas, our economy is very unstable. And I think those of you know that, and those of you who have retirements that are based in the stock market, you're seeing losses. Does this not create difficult times? And think about the violence in these major cities that's spreading beyond these major cities. The shooting, the robbings, the carjacking, all of that. I mean, it's to a point where there are people saying, I don't want to leave my house. I'm afraid to. Because they may get shot, robbed, or beat up. And it's something that's getting progressively worse. And I think all of you have seen that if you follow the news and things of that nature. And it says, for people will love only themselves and their money. That's obvious. They will be boastful and proud, scoffing at God, which you're seeing more and more and more today, disobedient to their parents, and ungrateful. They will consider nothing sacred. Where do I go with this? When I see this thing, they consider nothing sacred. Well, the anti-God, the anti-Christianity. But what focuses in, terrifies me, and haunts me more than anything is the abortion. And where they're defining now up to the point of delivery, and they have now gone beyond that after delivery. They will consider nothing sacred. So they're looking at human life as not even being sacred, much less the ways of God and how to live correctly. These are our times. We need to be aware of it. And then I just want to go to Isaiah 55:7, because one of the things about God that I love, He always has a back door to change our ways both individually and as a nation and as a world. That back door is always there. Where in Isaiah 55:7 says, let the wicked change their ways and banish every thought of doing wrong. Let them turn to the Lord that He may have mercy on them. Yes, turn to our God, for He will forgive generously. You know, I think about being human, and there are times I do things wrong. There are times I do things I'm very shameful of, but yet God is always there to forgive. If my heart is honest when I go before Him and say, I'm sorry, help me not to do this again, and understand, He does. And He would do this for a nation if they would only turn back to them. Because I look at our country today and I just shudder. Now, in Deuteronomy 13:19, I know if you put this in context, he was addressing the nation of Israel back before they came into the promised land. Well, one thing I've understood about God's Word, it expands into time. It will move throughout the periods. And in this one it says, today I have given you the choice between life and death, between blessing and curses. Now I call on heaven and earth to witness the choice you make. Oh, that you would choose life. I kind of stopped right there. Oh, that you would choose life. It sounds like God already knows we're not going to. And I look at our nation today, it's gotten to a point. Can they turn around? I think some can, but the nation as a whole, no. When you see everything that is going on and everything that is going on globally, I think they've gone beyond that point of no return. And then it says that so that you and your descendants might live. Now individually, we have chosen life because that's why we're here. That's why we're in God's church. That's why we live His ways. That's why we love Him. But has the rest of the world chosen life? No. They've chosen death. And you can look at it. If you go to Deuteronomy 28 and read that, I read it in the New Living Translation, and I'll tell you what, it upset me. When you read about the blessings and the cursings, because the way that it's stated in the New Living Translation, it put a lot of fear into me. It did. It shook me, the way that it was stated. And I sit here and go, how can you get this nation to understand this? Of course, their attitude is, oh, that has nothing to do with us. We're not Israel. No, that's true. Or you can say, well, yes, we're the descendants, but that's not the point. The point is that God is talking to everybody here, individually and as a nation. He wants you to choose life. And that's why He says, so that you and your descendants might live. Because through this choosing of life, what do we know and understand? We understand the first resurrection. We understand things that the world does not. There is life. We have life. He has given it to us. And then there will come that time when this age, the people in this age, will come into a resurrection. Hopefully, and I believe the majority of them will choose life. But even God says, not all of them. So, brethren, I don't mean to scare anyone or anything like that. It's just something to be aware of. Because following Chuck's thing with Daniel, what is it telling us? I am convinced that we are in the last days. Now, where in that process, I don't know. But what's obvious with what's going on around us, it's telling us that. And that's where Jesus Christ told us to watch. Not only these events that are going on, but what is the most important thing He wants us to watch? Our spiritual life. No matter what happens, because some of this is going to be bad, that we stay with God. And we keep that peace that Christ has given us. So in a sense, brethren, it's kind of just saying, understand what's going on around you. Things are changing. They're changing quickly. Like with that one statement, in weeks, decades happen. So please beware and please stay with God.